And I think now that we have set up the landscape, I really want to bring in this view into the lens of a US India SaaS startup, right? And I think that's kind of the topic I want to go deep into. And the way I want to structure this conversation is really take each life cycle stage of a founder, and each of them are dealing with different kind of issues, right? As they're transitioning from pre-chat GPT SaaS into now kind of post-chat GPT AI first, the agentic world that we are kind of already entered in. So I want to start with first the 0 to 1 idea stage founder, right? So for a founder today based in India, picking up a problem statement really at the idea stage, what are some of the considerations the founders need to keep in mind as they are now kind of really starting the company on day zero, in going after, the AI space?
Yeah, I think the first, of course, the fundamentals don't change, right? At the end of the day, the fundamentals like, are you solving a real problem? Is there a big market for that problem? Just because you came up with a cool AI demo doesn't mean it's gonna fly. And obviously, if you want to be a venture-backed startup, you need to really think about like how you gonna get to like 100 million in 5 years, right? Is there a really big market, and what does the competition look like? What's the landscape look like? So the fundamentals are obviously the same thing as how it was even 5 years ago. But then once you figure out like that, the first step is still like making sure that you're working on the right problem and going after the right market. Like that's like rule number one. You don't even think about AI before that. And then when you start building solutions is when we're like, okay, that's when these things, when we just talked about previously, comes into questions like, can you actually build a reliable solution using AI for this problem? For example, if you are building something in the marketing land, like, the simplest one is like, okay, you are building a go-to-market campaign or you're building a blog. That's completely fine because it doesn't have to be deterministic. But if you're going after problems which require deterministic solutions, then it's probably not a good idea because you'll have really tough time not just building a solution, but also like convincing enterprises to adopt your solution. So we have seen in our own use cases where any workflow which requires a deterministic, um, so let's say for example a matching use case, let's say you get a bunch of people from some system and you got to match it with a bunch of people from Y system, and it needs to be 100% correct. You can't fail even one out of the time, 1 out of 10 times. Or if it's like a trading bot, when you have to like make sure you are placing trades, right? LLMs probably are not the right fit for that because yeah, it's basically you need to use a hybrid solution of like the traditional deterministic systems and LLMs to do only for the analysis side. So that's kind of how you need to think about it. But for the non-deterministic solutions, AI is great. In fact, for the non-deterministic solutions, if you're not using AI, then what you're even building? It's like we are in the middle of a generational shift in technology, right? So it all comes down to making sure you can build a version which works reliably. Then the last factor is the speed. This AI world is moving at an infinite, like it's just so crazy. It just feels even months or like years for me. Even 2 months ago, where we are, it's like, and the pace at which the new models are coming up. Now we have O1. I'm sure Anthropic will come up with a new model soon, and Google will drop their Gemini 2.0 sometime. So the space at which this is moving. I mean, if you think about it, earlier this year, I wouldn't be having this conversation at all. If we had, even like 6 months ago, if we had a podcast, we'll be talking about different things. So you got to be really, really fast. You got to move at like that's the third thing. I mean, obviously startups are required to move fast, but it's even like 10x more than what the previous expectations were.
And on the speed point, one of the kind of, I would say, under the surface frustrations I'm seeing with a lot of India-based founders is that they feel a little bit left behind just because all the action is happening in the Bay Area, right? So this is where all the fundamental shifts are happening. What are some of the things that kind of Indian founders can do to really kind of be up to speed, right? To be able to actually get that speed, you also need information. You need the right inputs at the right time.
I find all my information on Twitter. Even though I live in the Bay Area, it just you know, go find the top 100 companies, the top 50 companies, go find their founders, follow the companies and their founders, then follow who they follow. That's it. You have a feed which will give you all the latest information. That's how I find the latest RAG technology or the latest LLM technique to reduce hallucinations, all on Twitter. Of course, the ecosystem really helps if because so many meetups. Even we also organize monthly AI agent meetups here. So it's really helpful to like meet in person and exchange like information of what's working, what's not, what's what vector database should I use or anything like that. But I think a lot of the time you can just get it on Twitter. I think there is a false perception that you need to be in Silicon Valley for that. You can be anywhere in the world and get it. The only reason the Silicon Valley helps is for capital.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, it still hasn't changed even in 10 years. 10 years ago, when I left US, I went to London and then came back. Everyone was like, oh, Silicon Valley's done. There's a Silicon Alley in New York and some FinTech Alley in London and all that. Obviously, Bangalore is like, I think the second biggest after Silicon Valley. It's probably going to surpass all the other countries. But at the end of the day, it's still like the capital is here. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, because it's like to raise capital. So the best advice is like you can get all the information on Twitter. Just stay connected with founders, stay connected with investors. But if you want to raise capital and also hire some really good talent, maybe you can come here. Or if you want to build your go-to-market team, then it's probably like a good idea to build in the US, especially if you want to go after US markets. But in terms of just product and engineering talent, you don't need to be here. I think you can get all the information online, just being the right groups.
And I mean, I think going back to your earlier point, I think one of the things I'm really pushing very early stage, pre-seed idea stage founders in the US India corridor is to really think much more deeply about differentiation and right to win. I think with AI, the competitive landscape has just gone into a different orbit, right? And I mean, there's obviously a global gold rush happening, but I think just the ubiquity of being able to build any product, any use case, I mean, very soon almost everyone can be a developer, right? So when you live in this kind of a world, you need to be, as a founder, be very, very intellectually honest and rigorous about why you will win, right? What is your unique differentiation? Or even from a technology perspective, do you go deeper into specific verticals or into specific areas, right? I mean, I think that was one of the big problems the last decade with sort of Indian SaaS, where it became very, very incremental. And I think with AI, that's almost like it's come to that precipitating point where you can no longer build in an incremental way. I mean, you'll get just killed by some company, not even from Silicon Valley, but from like Eastern Europe or LATAM.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And that's another thing. I feel like AI is also going to decentralize innovation, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the talent here, like all the code gen tools and everything which is coming up, you don't need that level of like talent density. Having said that, obviously, like India has a ton of talent, but it's even beyond India. It's just globally, it's going to decentralize the AI product development, which is exciting for I think humanity in general. The other thing I would say for specifically for Indian founders is like I feel like this is just a cultural thing. I feel like the other thing is obviously like the Indian ecosystem. And so we have an engineering team in India. So I'm in Bangalore every 3 months or 6 months there. So I kind of have a good ecosystem. So the really amazing density of talent, but also I feel like the innovation culture here is getting, I think it's getting really good in Bangalore, but it's already established in Silicon Valley. Meaning what I mean is like if a founder makes it, like let's say if I make a bunch of money, the first thing I do is invest in a bunch of my friends and startups, and that's a giving back culture, and that's a very strong. Even in Europe, right? When I was in London, when somebody made a big exit, they would just go to south of France and buy some mansion and retire. It's not like they would become a VC or something and give back, right? And that's why even Europe is suffering, but that culture is amazing, right? So I hope we can build that in Bangalore and Gurgaon and other centers in India. The second thing I feel like also is like founders are always rolled out the red carpet in Silicon Valley. You're always treated really, really well, which is not the same. I've seen because I've been in Bangalore, I've been in London. It's not all the same. It's more like, obviously you're a VC, so like a lot of the times there's a little bit of I wouldn't say like entitlement is not the right word, but like I tried to have a meeting with a VC in Bangalore, and he showed up after 1 hour, and he was like he didn't read anything about me, he didn't know anything about me. Just like there's a lot of that kind of thing. Whereas here, people are already well prepared, and they're like, they're founder, they know like not to waste founders' time. Founders are the most precious. So there's also that aspect, which I think makes the Silicon Valley like what it is in the last 10 years. So I hope we can take all of these aspects of giving back, this culture of celebrating founders and then export it to centers like Bangalore and Gurgaon, where they can build an very thriving AI ecosystem there, and maybe you can lead the charge.
Yes, yes, no, absolutely. I think it's already kind of starting to happen. I think the Indian ecosystem is kind of almost on an exponential curve in terms of
Yeah,
maturity. And I think now, like when I started my career in venture in 2011, there were absolutely no role models. I mean, the only role models were Narayan Murthy and Azim Premji.
yeah,
And now in the last 10 years, we have the Bansals and the Bhavishes, right? That young founders are looking up to. And now I think as more exits are happening, I mean, the Indian public markets are ripping, so a lot of IPOs are happening. So I think now that liquidity cycle is kind of really starting to happen, and hopefully a lot of that will get back into the ecosystem. And so yeah, it's I think it's going to be really exciting times in the next decade.